My Lords, we are living through an unprecedented and uncontrolled monetary experiment. Starting in March 2009, the Bank of England began a programme of money printing that would have put to shame a 1970s Latin American junta. We have increased since that time the amount of money in circulation by an almost literally unbelievable 50%. And nearly half of that increase has been since 2020 as a consequence of the pandemic. You can't magic up that amount of currency without having deleterious impacts on people's lives, although people don't always join the dots. But a number of the things that people complain about in this country all have their root cause in excessively loose monetary policy. Most obviously the squeeze on living standards, but also the rise in house prices, the divergence between haves and have-nots in terms of assets, and indeed the public sector strikes that continue to plague us, as your lordships will know if you travel here by train. All of them have this root in excessive inflation. We heard about the malign consequences of inflation from the noble Lord Macpherson of Earl's Court. I think I'd go further than him. He said that QE exacerbated but didn't cause the inflation. What else will cause inflation if not such a massive expansion of the money supply? Milton Friedman said that inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon. It is caused by too much money chasing too few goods. Milton, thou shouldst be living at this hour. The Bank of England hath need of thee. It was quite extraordinary to hear the then member of the Monetary Policy Committee, Gert-Jan Vlieger, saying in April of 2020 that the balance sheets of the bank would be comparable to those of the central banks of the Weimar Republic or of Zimbabwe. His words, not mine. How can we look at that and not consider the consequential impact on people's lives in the real world? I've little really to add to the brilliant analysis of my noble friends Lords Bridges and Lamont, but let me make a point about accountability. When people complain about rising prices, about rising asset values, about the difficulty of having to run to stand still, to whom should they direct their complaint if the root cause is made by independent authorities that have been put deliberately beyond the reach of elected ministers? There comes a point when, if the vast majority of the decisions that impact on our lives are taken not just by the Bank of England but by a series of other quangos and agencies, from the Climate Change Committee to the European Court of Human Rights to the Office of Budget Responsibility, that the act of casting a ballot is devalued. And that's something that this report takes some steps towards addressing. My noble friend Lord Bridges hinted at, but he could have gone a little bit further, talking about the mandates and the appointment processes for governors and other senior staff at the Bank of England. If you're in for a couple of terms and then nobody is going to bother you again, that strikes me as a fairly weak form of accountability. And I'd also like to see Parliament taking some responsibility for the mandate of the bank. Specifically, I'd like to see its terms of references tweaked so that this kind of unprecedented monetary expansion can't happen without approval. I'd like to see the terms of the Bank of England changed so that the maintenance of the value of the currency, sound money, is expressly recognised as one of its goals. But whether or not you agree with me, whether or not you think that that is a proportionate policy, surely we need to have stronger mechanisms of oversight. My Lords, today is local election day. It's one of the few elections that your lordships are allowed to participate in. The polls are still open, but I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that the election result will be a massive win for the can't be bothered party. That the number of people who took the trouble to register to vote but did not bother to cast a ballot today will be greater than the votes cast for all the other parties put together. Why is that? Is it sheer cynicism, sheer apathy? Or is it not that the decisions that most directly touch on people's lives have been lifted out of the democratic process, and placed in the hands of bodies that are invulnerable to public opinion. Changing the mandate of the Bank of England isn't going to solve that problem on its own, but it is part of a process of restoring the supremacy of the elected representative and thereby restoring honour and meaning and purpose to the act of casting a ballot.